hope that it will be fixed and contributing toward that. I focus on proving people wrong, because when you prove them wrong, the next time they meet a woman walking into the room, they're like, maybe I shouldn't assume she's a secretary. And I think that's more important. So I focus on doing the best I can, being the best at what I do, and try my work, let my work speak for myself. And I have been able to change people's perspective. When I started in Russia, for example, training, they didn't want me in the space program. Eventually, they, gave up, and now there are 2 women that are actually in the program that joined the program after I left.
So before Rajan gets mic'd up, one last thing: how does one become an astronaut? Is there a vacancy ad somewhere where you apply? How do you do it?
No, well, it's very difficult to join the government space program because there's a long list of people wanting to get in, and a lot of candidates, so it's not easy. I was not even a U.S. citizen, and Iran doesn't have a space program, so NASA was not an option when I joined. I went to U.S. when I was a teenager. But eventually I found a way that by being an entrepreneur and successful and sold my company, then I used what I earned in doing what I always wanted to do. So I actually paid for my ticket. But it's becoming more affordable, and tomorrow when you hear about all the changes happening in the space program, you'll see that it is available and will be affordable for everyone to do that in future.
Great. Thanks so much, Anuja. Thank you. We'll go to Rajan next. So Rajan is, long-time head of Google in India, now Google South Asia and South Asia. He'll give a good perspective, and he's McKinsey, he's Dell, Microsoft, a lot of things. Lived in the US for a long time, came to India. So Rajan, I have found, is on most topics related to the internet or digital divide or anything digital, he is one of the best speakers, simply because he's got so much data and such a great perspective. So Rajan, digital divide, innovation and budget, special focus on how it's helping women.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Sorry I was late. By the way, you should have this. How do you get a job in space? Naukri should have these listings, no?
Yeah, that's what I'll talk to that.
I want to apply on Naukri. How to be an astronaut. By the way, we have this Indian team that's trying to put our face first, going to the moon. This whole project, Google X project.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So those of you that actually can't go to space, you can watch the space landing. They're out trying to do that.
Yes.
Sorry I was late. So I think there are about 7 billion people in the world. 3.5 billion of them are connected to the internet. 3.5 billion people aren't. If you look at a country like India, 1.3 billion, about 400 million on the internet. So we've got another 900 million to go, right? And at Google, we've obviously spent a lot of time trying to understand what are the different challenges. And I thought I'd just spend a little bit of time talking about what are the barriers. I'm assuming you talked about connectivity, which is you're doing some amazing work on that. And then also maybe give you a few examples of the kinds of things that we are doing and that we see other companies doing to address each of these challenges, right? So the first big challenge really is around access, right? How do you even get on the internet for, let's say, the 3.5 billion people in the world who are not on the internet? And we break the access problem really down into 3 parts of it, right? So the first part is really low-cost devices, right? Today, if you look at India, there are over 500 million Indians who have a feature phone. A feature phone costs about 800 Indian rupees. That's called it $12 or $13. But an affordable, reasonable quality smartphone costs about 5,000 rupees, right? So in a country with very low disposable incomes, you've got this huge disparity between what's affordable from a device standpoint and what you can get in terms of an internet access device. So affordable devices, one big barrier. The second barrier really is affordable data. Now in India, that was actually a problem, interesting for Indian entrepreneurs, is use cases, right? I'll give you an interesting statistic. As we go into rural India and do all this work, social, which has been arguably the killer use case for most emerging markets for the first 1 or 2 billion users in emerging markets, is actually not a killer use case, right? Actually, the use cases that these users want are actually very, very different. And not surprisingly, what they really want to do is make their lives better. And what does that mean? It means find ways to make another 100 rupees, another 200 rupees, another 500 rupees a month. So if they can find ways in which they can make another 500 rupees a month, that is the killer use case, right? And I've been saying this now for about a year. If you could have an app where, let's say 800 million Indians who live in rural India, at a click of a button could figure out the jobs that they can have, could click of a button get all the government services, schemes sort of accessible, those would actually get to 50, 100, 200 million users. So those are really the kind of barriers, right? So this is actually a very, very complex problem. It's got many moving parts to it. And for us to really go from 3.5 billion consumers or people on the internet to 7 billion, which should be our ambition collectively, over the next 5 to 10 years, you've got to systematically address each of these challenges. Now at Google, as I said, we've been focused on each of these areas. In terms of low-cost devices, Android is our operating platform. So India, it's very interesting. I joined Google 7 years ago. We had 100 million internet users and 10 million smartphone users. 7 years later, we have 400 million internet users and 300 million smartphone users, right? And the inflection point happened when a smartphone was available. The first big inflection point, we went from 10 million users to 100 million smartphone users when you could buy a smartphone for less than 10,000 rupees. That was a magic price point. We knew, we had a hypothesis that if we could get an Android phone for below 10,000 rupees, we'd see this explosive growth. That happened. The next big shift, 100 million to 300 million smartphone users, was really enabled by two things, right? One, we had to get the cost of a smartphone below 6,000 rupees, $100. You broke that barrier, and then boom, you see another 100 million users. That was one, and the second one was affordable data. I talked about Jio. So the next big barrier we have to break is 2,000 rupees, right? How can we deliver a high-quality smartphone, full feature, full access to the full internet smartphone for 2,000 rupees? And 2,000 rupees is about 32, 33 US dollars, right? So we're very focused on that. At Google I/O, Sundar, our CEO, announced Android Go. We'll talk more about that next week, which is basically, think of it as Android. It's a full-fledged Android operating system, but it should enable much lower cost devices. So, we are really planning that sometime in 2018, we can get to this magical price point. And then to get 1 billion Indians on smartphones, we need basically 1,000 rupee high-quality smartphone. Technically, we don't know how to get there yet, but we think that's sort of so that's the, so Android and lower-cost Android full-feature smartphones is sort of one big bet. On low-cost connectivity, we've been very focused on Wi-Fi. We're not in the telecoms business, but my view is that if you have 3G and 4G pervasive, right, you address part of the problem. But if you really want Indians today on average, by the way, consume about 4 GB a user per month, which is a lot of data, by the way. But our appetite for data consumption is actually infinite, literally infinite. And we think that if you can get pervasive public Wi-Fi, you could take this 4 GB number to 20, 30 GB. So we launched a partnership with the Indian Railways, RailTel, to build and operate high-speed public Wi-Fi in India's railway stations. So we have a goal to get to 400 stations. We're now in over 200 stations, and we have about 7.7 million monthly active users on this network. And on average, they consume about 20 GB per user per month. 20 GB. And by the way, this is transit Wi-Fi. Imagine, right? 20 GB per user per month. People just going through railway stations. I mean, that's how much we love data. And by the end of next year, when we have 400 stations, we're going to essentially have a territory coverage potential of 300 million Indians. So I want you to imagine 300 million Indians consuming 20 GB per user per month on these Wi-Fi networks. So that's a big focus. But we also think that, by the way, for India to really get every single one of the billion Indians online, we're going to have to go beyond 3G, 4G, and 5G. We will need sort of next generation transformational technologies. We have projects like Loon, Facebook has their project, and we need to kind of do that, because if you really want to connect, very rural parts of India, you just can't basically build cell towers. So that's around connectivity. The other thing I'll talk a little bit about is connecting women in rural India. So only 10% of internet users in rural India are women. Right? There are a lot of reasons for that. I walked in late. I heard some of the reasons you said. Lack of awareness, lack of understanding. They don't have devices. So men in the home may actually have a smartphone, but women don't. etc. So we partnered with Tata Trust exactly 2 years ago to do ground level activation in rural India to change this picture, right? So 10% of internet users in rural India women. I mean, that gender divide is actually, we haven't seen it anywhere else in the world, including the Middle East, right? So what we did was, so we essentially said, look, let's go recruit women in rural India. We will give them smartphones. We'll teach them about the internet. We'll teach them how to teach other women, train other women, and then we'll give them a stipend. And today, actually, we're pretty excited about this, very proud of this. We are now in 110,000 villages. We have 30,000 full-time internet sathis. And over the last 10 years, we've trained 12 million women. And our goal is by end of next year, we want to be at 300,000 villages, which is half of India. I mean, for those of you that are not from India, that is a very large number of villages. And we want to, this next version of, it's called an Internet Sathi. But actually, they become ambassadors. Their social status goes up by orders of magnitude, right? When we go around with the Internet Sathis.
The question is, do the husbands and mothers-in-law teach them?
Actually, so initially the husbands, I shouldn't generalize, but are not really fans of this idea, right? But actually what's interesting, Sanjeev, is after a few months, they see what it's doing to the family status, what it's doing for, the wife, the spouses, to the kids' education and so on and so forth. So I've actually met at least 400 or 500 sathis over the last 2 years, and every single one of the husbands, Sanjeev, is just a raving fan, because all of a sudden they become ambassadors of this is a great thing to do, right? So we think this is very important. But one of the, what we've learned is you have to go village by village, right? This is not PowerPoint presentations or internet websites and apps, because you have to get smartphones in their hands, you have to educate, you have to go, and so it's been just a remarkable, it's probably the single biggest thing that, from a learning standpoint we've done, because we've learned so much about what does it really take to get these, like for instance, right, if you look at a coverage, telco coverage of the country, 3G and 4G now covers all of India. We're in 110,000 villages. In more than half those villages, internet is accessible in only a small percentage of the village. So you have to go to this house in this corner to get access. So just because a village is covered actually doesn't mean in India a village is covered. It means, like for instance, that's really important, right? So if you really want to cover the whole village, you actually need a different kind of technology, which is why things like Loon and so on become very important.
Yeah, thanks, Rajan. Now, the next speaker is Roya. Now, the last country, or one of the last countries in the world you'd expect a bunch of women entrepreneurs, women doing startups, is Afghanistan. And that is precisely what Roya is enabling. Your story.
Thank you. It's a really pleasure to be here. And already the other panelists already explained about the innovation and digital divided. And I would go mostly about the personal story, that how I connected the technology and how the technology changed my life and how I can help the other women to change their lives. I started with a story that from my childhood. I grew up in a small city called Zoranj in Nimruz in south part of Afghanistan. Across of the street from the house that I grew up, there was an empty plot of the land. One day on that empty plot of the land, Taliban collected all the books and TV sets and set them on the fire. And only Islamic books at that time were allowed. Their message was clear, only our ideas matter, only we matter, the Taliban rule. From my window, I saw the ideas to dreams and freedom applause. From a street to the match, those TVs and those books were only my window to outside world turned to the ash. First fire, then darkness. I became angry, but after a couple of, I glimpsed a couple of dreams. In Afghanistan at that time, we didn't have a good TV show programs, and we watched the Bollywood movies and the cartoons to the VHS tapes. It was the only way to escape to the dream world that was much prettier than the world that's living under the Taliban rules. But with the TV sets on the fire and the books turned to the ash, we didn't have much to do. We confined to our houses. During the Taliban, the women are not allowed to go outside without a male guardian. We are confined to our houses, and the only interaction was happen in the house that was separated with big walls. We tried to talk with each other and saying our secrets and showing our rights.
one loves the darkness. The darkness was the aim. Keeping children ignorant was a dream. No critical thinking was the goal. No access to the outsider world was the plan. What stood for the truth was the word that came from the mullah, from the father, and from the teacher, all by the nature conservative. They tried to building a culture to keep all of us in darkness. Boys keep in the darkness, but for the girls was much worse. Most of the girls were rushed to marry at a very young age, and after a while they discovered that they are surviving a very limited, a very difficult lives. Because of this investigation in my young life, I tried to imagine that one day I would have watched my cartoons and films in a smaller box that is smaller than TV, and I would have some things that I could read my books, but it could be disappeared before the Taliban can find and destroy them. Many years later, I found that the tablets, TVs, they make my dream to become true. I went to the school in 2003, went back to Afghanistan, and I went to the school. I selected to be computer science engineer. And then after graduation, I started to my own software development company, and I became the first tech female CEO in Afghanistan. But being a tech female CEO anywhere in the world will introduce you some obstacle. But for women in Afghanistan that they are not supposed to work outside, the attack against of me was devastating, both personally and professionally. It was very hard to get in the jobs from the clients that they didn't want to work with a woman. And even if you could bring them, they are often refused to paying for the job that you have done for them. They put on the spy, they threatened, and they follow us. But sometimes I feel like it's too much, but if I was quit, what message I could send to the other girls who want to have same career like I did? I didn't want to quit, but I decided to lower our physical address and using becoming as a digital entrepreneur, and I expanded my presence online. That's why I found the investors and I keep continuing the works that I love. But I knew that there are millions of the girls who are out there just like me. They're curious, but giving a new vision to explore the world. They wanted to know more, but they don't know what's truly possible. So it's led me to start a Digital Islam Fund, a non-profit organization that is trying to giving access to the digital literacy and education for the women and children in the women countries. DSTF started with two goals, with one goal and one dream. With the goal that to see that technology is an accessible option for everyone, with the dream that everyone, even those who are living in conservative countries, they have access to opportunities and education, no matter regardless of their gender or social status. It may seem like a big dream, but if you do not have the courage to dream big, nothing will ever be changed. And for Digital Citizen Fund, we're trying to educate the women to learn about digital literacy, social media. They learn about networking and STEAM programs, and as well financial literacy. A year ago, I wanted to tell you the story that a year ago I was asked from US to organizing a robotic team that competed at the first global challenge, an international contest for teenagers. And I thought that why I should not make all-girl team. But it was very difficult. We trying to find the girls. So I took an exam from 150 students, and then we ended up with 20, but many of them didn't have their family's permission or didn't know what the robot is. We ended up with 6 girls that they had the knowledge of robotic, and as well they had the family's permission, but none of them had a visa to come to the United States. They were twice rejected. But we didn't want to be quiet. We continue to be persistent. Our story came to the media, and the media brought the attention of the people in US and all around of the world. We got the attention of the Congress, and 53 congressmen signed this petition. And after 353 congressmen, we got the attention of the White House, and then at the last minute, President Trump gave a visa to our girls.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. The girls came to the United States and they competed with all other nations, and they got the silver medal for their college achievement. This was a victory for vision that for a country that for centuries ignored the women's abilities in science and technology. They come back and they get a hero returns, and President Ghani and First Lady honored them. And it was a start of a movement in my country, a movement that I wasn't seen in the past. Our leaders said they changed their views on not only the women's ability, but also considering the youth's development through the science and technology. These women and girls become as a symbol of persistence and reliance of thousands of them. They are the first generation of the Afghan women who get an education to inspire them to have a better life, to imagine a better life, and get education to learn about technology and be representative of their countries in 21st centuries. Today, the Afghan community and Afghan governments are trying to support us to build in the first school of the science, technology, engineering, maths, and innovation in Afghanistan. And we call it the first MIT of Afghanistan. Digital STEM Fund has helped 10,000 of the women to come to our program, and we helped this year 100 women to start their own startups, that to get their lives on their own hand, the lives of the choice. And we also we're going to organize the first conference of technology innovation and entrepreneurship next year, that to showcase of all of these projects, that to see that the women's the ability, that what they can do. I want to mention also that 2 days ago, our robotic team came to Estonia to participate at the biggest festival of robotics, and they've come this time with their new innovations to help the farmers with the robot that they are a prototype of the robot to helping the farmers. And they win the competition. They get first place, Poland gets second place, and thank you, and Estonia third place. And I hope that with this movement that we started in Afghanistan, we see that, we make sure that the next generation of Afghanistan in the next 20 years see Afghanistan as a country of high source of high tech rather than a country of the terror and war. Thank you.
Wow. So Sanjeev, we have to go next year. When is your event? We are going to come. When is it? April.
April. That was-
Sanjeev, let's make sure.
Yeah,
Afghanistan.
absolutely.
You have to help us get a visa.
Roya, that is truly inspirational. For those that don't know, Roya was named to Time Magazine's 100 most influential people for the world in the year 2013. Thank you, Roya.
Yeah, yeah.
Our next speaker is an entrepreneur from India, Radha Kapoor Khanna, founder and executive director, Indian School of Design and Innovation, also runs an incubator accelerator in Bombay. Over to you, Radha.
Sure. Thank you. I think it's pretty inspiring. I think hearing all of them speak, I think really moving actually. I think starting out actually, I did my formal training in design at Parsons in New York, and while I was there, I think as an enthusiast designer, wanting to sort of unleash my creative skills and wanting to do something for India for social impact. I actually, chose to work with an NGO called Open Mind, where we were actually resolving the issue of bridging the gap, the communication gap between rural and urban India. And this was almost 12, 13 years back. And I think it came with its own set of challenges. So we actually I was from the design end of the team, worked on, putting together, designing actually a hotline, telephone booth which was internet connected. And of course, India coming with so many languages and issues of so many local dialects. The issue was how do we get the messaging across, in the language the user speaks in. So hence, of course, with the internet, I think you needed that human intervention to come in. And we went on to design this booth with representations and symbols which defined topics of like agriculture, healthcare, and just-in-time information. But as Rajan just spoke, I think it's good that now they're coming up with voice-based systems for that, because I think we went on to do this project, but again, I think it wasn't very successful then. And then of course, I was going to look at education as a serious investment. And I think from the end of creating jobs for the whole digital space. So we actually came up with DICE, is the acronym we actually use, which means Design, Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship. So I think going forward, DICE, I think these 4 skills are going to be really important skills which will be required for the future job workforce. We have our own incubators and our own accelerators help launch startups, and particularly women-led startups as well. So I think with the advent of new age careers, I mean, someone wants to be a drone pilot, someone wants to become a digital detox planner, or AI specialist, and I think these careers were really unheard of. And I think also the aspirational youth wants to work for companies like Google and Facebook as well. So how do we sort of make sure we train them for the right kind of skill sets? Because unfortunately, our employment rate was only about 16.2%. So I think 84% of people who are actually graduating from universities in India are not coming out with the right skill sets which are required by the job workforce, today in India. So hence, I think it is, sort of the duty of academia and industry to sort of collaborate and work together. And so we actually approached my alma mater, Parsons, to come join hands with us to set up this university. And then we actually went ahead to actually partner with WPP, which is, of course, you all must know, Sir Martin Sorrell's communication company. So there it's, we actually have professionals who come in and teach, skills in digital marketing, PR, social media. So all your sort of new age, media skills. And the latest sort of being entrepreneurship, which is mentored by Babson from Boston. I think they're probably the ones who've come up with the right methodology to actually teach, entrepreneurship. So I think these are the kind of things that we're doing as part of the ecosystem. We also recently actually tied up with Adobe to help sort of set up Adobe Digital Academy. So I think, sort of setting up a center where we can have train-the-trainer programs, actually take design software, to sort of schools, to sort of company executives as well. So I think it's really important, with the whole advent of digitalization, like how do you sort of teach these skill sets and, sort of take them out there. So this is some of the work which we're actually doing, as part of the ecosystem. Some of the actually interesting startups that are coming out as well. There's a student who actually designed a tree app which kind of monitors the life of a tree, how much moisture it has. So I think, and there's another one which actually got launched, which focuses on yoga design wear. So it's actually become the official yoga design wear, which Modi launched for the International Yoga Yoga Day. So I think there are a lot of interesting startups sort of coming out, which are women-led. Recently actually also launched a blog, a creative platform actually, which kind of brings innovation sort of led content to users. So I think we all keep talking about innovation, but innovation isn't really easy to get. So I think sort of, telling people what's really happening out there globally, what are the collaborations happening, whether it's in food technology, wearable technology. So I think bringing that information closer to the user, so it's easy data for them to consume, because otherwise it can get really like heavy and yeah.
Thanks, brother. So just one question. So what's it like to be a woman entrepreneur in India? What's your experience? Do people treat you differently? Do you have hurdles which men don't have?
So I think, honestly, I think it's been pretty positive. I think the environment has really sort of changed now, and especially I think having platforms like these, where you get sort of invited to speak, you sort of get, sort of more notice for your work that you're doing. So I think they're great industry bodies who are doing some great work, as well. And I think it's how you conduct yourself and the respect you command. So I think it's all about building that confidence and conviction in what you really do. So I think it all comes from the individual and from the passion you're doing and for the larger purpose you're working for.
Thanks. We are open to questions. But before anybody, I'll ask the first question. Huh? So, Roya. So you're doing work which the Taliban must not be very happy with, right? You're helping women become entrepreneurs. So there must have been situations where you've had a threat or you've been advised not to do this, and have there been such situations?
Yeah, I wanted to tell it. One of the schools we built an IT center in one of the village near to Herat, and
the family didn't happy, the students were happy, the principal happy, but then the family wasn't happy because they say that this is bringing the disvalue and they bring the Western idea. So they didn't want that we teach the kids about the internet. And this idea is spread by local Taliban and conservative leaders in the village. So they started to protest it, and this bring the attention to the local Taliban. And then they started to send the threats. And they usually do 2 times threats, and the 3rd times they shoot. So that's the work that the Taliban doing that. And then they attacked the car that my sister and one of our teacher was in the car. And that's made it that no one wants to go to that village to provide the training.
And this is a village that's not under control of the Taliban officially.
Yeah, I mean, they say that the government says that they control, but they don't have in the village that much control. And sometimes these are local Talib. They are part of the people living in the society, but they have the local like Taliban ideology, so they don't want to have access. The women have access.
So why do you do this? I mean, you were in New York. I mean, you've been carrying on there. I mean, why do this? What drives you?
I mean, I think that this is it's make me more encouraged to doing, because if we don't do it, who is going to start that? And that's what they want. They want to discourage you, disappoint you, and they leave you. And I think I have to also say that in 2014 I left Afghanistan because of all of the threats that I got, and also the discouragement from the government that they didn't support my work. I left Afghanistan, and then after a year I thought that this is what exactly my enemies wanted. It wasn't only local Taliban, it wasn't only conservative, also the mafia of IT industries. They're people who call themselves educated, but they are not. They have the same ideology, but just they're wearing suits and they're acting that they are open-minded people. And I thought that's not exactly what they did, but because I was one person, or one of a few who doing the technology, if we build 100 people, thousands of people, 100,000s of the people, it make it normalized, it would make it very difficult for conservatives to attack us. That's why I started DCF, and right now I'm helping the other women to become entrepreneur. And this year we itself helped 100 women to start their startups.
So 100 have started?
Yes.
Thank you. We are open to questions. Ma'am, you had a question?
There's a mic.
You want
let's
the
get your mic.
We'll let the ladies go first.
Hi, I'm Meenakshi, and it's great to see the way organizations like Tata Trust and Google are working to bridge the divide between the rural and the urban India. But there's one divide which has been left unnoticed. This is the people, especially the migrants who are living in towns, in the slums. The exact problems that we mentioned here about internet not being accessed, women not getting smartphones, women not knowing what internet can do, I run an organization called Helper for You. And the way we introduce Helper for You is trying to create a mobile exchange on phone and do what Naukri.com did to my career when I was a young person. So we are trying to bring jobs to the domestic workers on phone. But the same challenges we are facing, I have been to all slums in Delhi and Bombay. Women don't have phones, and they are the last ones to get a phone. And if they have a phone, internet kaise use kare? So maybe their kids are using it for them. While our service is largely based on SMS and calls for them, but as soon as they start using a web app, they get so many more job opportunities on their phones. So is there something that we can do for them? That's a big market. There are 10 million domestic workers only as per DWSSC standards who are going to be there in the by 2018. So that's a big market.
Yeah, I mean, look, just speaking for Google, Neha, I think, is there. Neha leads our Internet Sati initiative. Neha is our chief Sati. It was her idea, by the way. She, 2.5, 3 years ago, came to me and said, we should do this, and we have this whole thing. So we'd love to. I mean, we haven't focused on that segment yet, but I think, between us, Tata Trust, we can, get one of the carriers, either Airtel or Jio.
Employment leads to so much of exploitation for them.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, let's follow up.
Yeah, there's a question there. So we'll come to you then, your third.
Thanks for the awesome session, and thanks especially to Roya for her absolutely magnificent effort. I think the question is we've broken a lot of barriers in terms of cost of usage, content, reach, price for mobiles and all that. But do you think there's a barrier called intimidation, the kind that Roya faced in one sense, the intimidation of technology itself, especially when you go to places where the villagers don't seem to want to adopt in the first step, but when you convince them, they do adopt. but they feel a little intimidated by technology, digital, the way we talk, the way we browse and all that. What's your thought on that?
You want to take that? You see a lot of this. And then I'll have, maybe you can get the mic also to Neha. Neha, you want to?
So in terms of intimidation, I agree there are two types of intimidation. One is the type that we just talked about, and in villages here also, there is sort of this notion where the head of the household, the man, or sometimes even the mother-in-law, they put someone down so much that they're afraid to even try something to fail at it and demonstrate that yes, maybe I am not smart enough. So the only thing I can say that it actually helps with what we're doing, Internet Sati, or the project we're doing, Dhruv, is that when you want to access the internet or do something, you can do it in a private setting. So you don't have to ask someone for help. You don't have to interact with anyone. It's a device and a one-on-one relationship that you can have. So I think that intimacy goes away once they understand that, yes, I can operate this menu, or yes, I can operate this device and no one can see me and I can fail at it and try again and succeed. So I think that goes away. The type of intimacy that Roya faces, and I'll let her address that, it's something that is societal, and I think it's not something you overcome overnight with or any education that you receive online. Something that I recommend is it starts actually with the fathers in the household actually giving that type of power to their young girls. And that's the only type of things that changes. And the mothers telling their sons that you need to treat the women in the house or outside the society with respect. And this is something will take generations to come.
I also want to add that, as I mentioned, I was a part of Nimruz province. It's a very conservative and close-minded people. But what's happening right now with our programs, it's the community itself contacted us that they want to bring the program in Nimruz. And I said that they don't have a budget. They said that they will put the budget. And we have today 2 girls from Nimruz province in our robotic team because they saw that encouragement, they saw the achievement. And as Anusha says that it's not going to happen in one day. It's almost like 5-6 years that I'm working mostly in this program, and after 6 years, Nimruzian people wants to open the program in their province. It takes time.
Neha, you want to just take a minute?
So I pretty much agree, but I think it's really important, what we've realized with Internet Sati is it's really important to understand the people and not really try to antagonize them, because they do get overwhelmed. This is a lot of change for them, and how do you make them comfortable is very important. So for example, with Internet Sati, women are not allowed to touch smartphones. That is something which we came across saying, you're a woman, don't touch my smartphone, you might spoil it. Which is why we said, okay, we understand it's a smartphone, expensive device, so we'll give the women smartphone devices, but let them play around with it, right? So we didn't go and say, we're here, we're going to do something different which you're not allowing people to do. We said, we will help you in a manner so that we're not going against what you are currently doing. So it's important to keep them friendly, it's important to understand them and slowly sort of help them understand there is value in what you're providing them. And that way that intimidation goes away. So now with Internet Sati, they've seen the women help the children. They've seen the women help the family. They've seen the women help the community. Suddenly, internet, which was a bad thing, is a good thing for them. So that's how I think it's important to understand the people and work with them.
Good afternoon. This specific for Rajan. You've actually presented some amazing facts about the internet penetration in India, especially the numbers like 4 GB per user and 20 GB in the shared services, shared Wi-Fi. But do you also see a negative impact growing because of internet penetration in India, both in urban and rural areas? And is any initiative that Google taking up to kind of mitigate those negative impacts?
Yeah, so I think, look, by and large, access to information is always positive. I think we've heard the most inspiring story from just on this panel. Look, the things we have to worry about are things like privacy, security, like harmful things happening on the internet, right? And so, for instance, I think it's very important to build awareness among consumers. So I know whether it's Google, Facebook, or other companies have initiatives to really build, how do you use the internet in an appropriate way, right? So you don't get hacked, so you don't get trailed, all the things that kind of we hear. I think that's very important. Also, we've, IMI, which is our Internet and Mobile Association, we have an initiative to actually educate, let's say, the police forces of the country, right? So that, for instance, when you don't end up throwing people in jail for the wrong reasons as well, right? So you could cause harm to yourself by saying something in public that, is very appropriate but may not be liked. So I think there are a number of things that need to be done, but I think the most important thing is how do you remain safe and secure as a consumer, as a user on the internet, right? Whether not being hacked all the way through, being avoided. So I think those are the sorts of things. But look, by and large, I think in a nation like India, where, look, the reality is we have 250 million children in schools. Most of them get a subpar education, right? And my view is we will never be able to build enough schools, have enough high-quality teachers without so we will need significant technology enablement, right? Not just the internet, but, layering ML, layering AI to solve our most important core issues in education, healthcare. So this is the first day of the test match. There's a lot more to come. We need to get 1 billion people online, and then we need to build these layers of high value, high quality, not we as in the ecosystem, right? To really empower India and educate India, provide, all the things that we need. So, I think the benefits far outweigh, it's 1000x of what could go wrong, but at the same time, we need to prevent, we need to educate so that the bad things don't happen.
Anusha, you want to add something?
What I wanted to add is internet, like any other technology, it should be looked at as a tool. And as a tool, you can use it to do good or bad. Of course, when you talk about rural communities, I think the education is of utmost importance, because it's like giving a knife to a child. If you're not careful, then they're going to cut themselves or do more harm. So it's important to, what we all talked about is sort of curated content, which is one of the areas we're focused on, is to bring services that are content and knowledge that are relevant and helpful to the rural communities. The good thing is that, because it's expensive, because it's time consuming, the users also are focused on that. The highest usage of internet content today is for entertainment and actually pornography. So that's where you see a lot of usage, and that's not good usage. But if you bring this with the right type of curated content to the users and show them how they can use it for good, then I think you see that part of the usage growing more significantly.
Yeah, there are many questions. Yes, ma'am, you have a question. Can you? Okay, she's on the mic. You go first. You go next.
Yeah. So my question is, I generally have a feeling which I feel many others share, that technology impacts the education last. So one important aspect for digital divide to bridge that is, take everybody along. So the new technologies on the horizon, which we are seeing is AR, VR, MR. So these things have great potential to kind of have the education laced right in the beginning, but not in the industry adapt it last. How anyone in the panel can share how AR is being adapted? Is it widening the gap, or is it helping narrow it?
Yeah,
And if you do the mic, then
no, I think that's a very relevant question, and I think that's the kind of creative approach that we're bringing to education, because I think technology has become so dynamic, and I think so does education, sort of to fill in that gap. So what we actually do is we conduct programs in AR, VR. In fact, we launch a center of immersive media where we're sort of, again, helping startups in this space to kind of emerge. Also have experts sort of come in for mentoring sessions. We've also set up a corpus fund to, to invest in these kind of startups as well. In fact, I think we were the first school in India to actually have the Oculus and the HoloLens as well as part of the experience. So I think that's where industry and academia really have to sort of integrate and come together to actually teach these technologies. So I think it's really a combination of both. So I think we're already doing that, and we hope to sort of do a lot more.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you have a question.
My name is Prashanti. My question is primarily to Rajan and also Sanjeev. It's about digitally native brands, like for example, a Warby Parker or a Dollar Shave Club. given the internet penetration in India, do you think we are ready for such an innovation in India, especially from a consumer point of view?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. But the topic is about women empowerment. You want to quickly just deal with that in 30 seconds? And then
Yes.
Yes.
Time is now.
Yeah, there was a couple of questions in the back. We are running out of time. 5 minutes left. Maybe.
By the way, like Lenskart is the largest, like we have now enough examples of truly native digital brand. Largest, I don't know how many of you know this, but the largest eyeglass manufacturer brand in India today is Lenskart. More than anybody else.
My question is to Rajan actually. So Rajan, you spoke a lot about how voice searches are increasing in India. I wanted to understand, where do you see the podcast culture going in India? Because we work in mental health and we have given out a lot of podcasts. They work in US, but they don't work in India. So are there platforms?
I have a request. The topic is digital divide, especially related to women. Maybe this question can be asked to Rajan outside. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Akshanda from Bangladesh. I run a company that's Preneur Lab that help women to get online. Also, we are running community Google Developer Group and Women Tech Makers Bangladesh. So through the community, we train 10,000 almost.
Coming in February, I'm going to bring him along.
Wow, great. Yeah, excellent. So we trained almost 10,000 university students in Android and other things. But when we were trying to reach the rural women, it's like the number was like very small. We were able to train like 3,000 and 3,500 women. And the smartphone user in Bangladesh, it's like 70 million. It's almost the half of the overall population. So I request you to take some initiative for Bangladesh as well, because the scenario of Bangladesh and India is almost like same. So I request you to take some initiative like Internet Sathi in Bangladesh as well, because the women of Bangladesh need that kind of support from Google as well.
Absolutely, and since you're here, Neha, maybe we can connect.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I came from Puerto Rico, and you may have heard that we were just ravaged by a hurricane type 5.
So sorry about that.
We were totally isolated for a few days. I was there when it happened. And we have the Lua project right now, so I wanted to learn a little bit about its resiliency and if it's sustainable, because right now our communications are still spotty, but I know that Google launched Loon already.
Has it helped? I mean, were you able to?
I think so.
Yeah. So Loon, for those of you who don't know, we basically send these balloons 19 kilometers up in the sky, and it's a telecom. So essentially, think of it as cell towers in the sky, right? And it's a technology that helps you kind of provide internet access to rural areas. So it's actually pretty scalable now. I mean, to your question, I think we've proved the technology, it works. In fact, when this disaster happened in Puerto Rico, we've got a bunch of balloons up there. And now, so it actually works, right? Because we figured out a way to kind of, instead of have the balloons go around the earth, we figured out a new model where it can. And in fact, in India, we've been trying to run these experiments we're actually now in a couple of countries in Latin America that you'll hear about soon. And it's actually pretty, you can't, it is limited quantities of internet. You can't get, gigabytes and gigabytes, but it's actually good enough for internet, especially if you're in areas where you can't access internet or in disaster-prone areas like where you were. So technically, it is now solved, and you should, if we're lucky, you should see it in a neighborhood around you. So.
I want to do an ad insertion for one of the entrepreneurs from India here. That is a young lady who is doing a project that will be launching 200 satellites, a constellation of satellites to provide internet connectivity to developing countries. So if there are investors, she's here. She's one of the selected entrepreneurs. So she was talking to me yesterday. She's going to be on a panel tomorrow, I think. So if there are people here interested to support her,
that'd be great.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take one last question out of time.
Yeah, hi. My name is Amrita. My question is, do you think in India, is it going to be Roti, Kapda, Makan and Internet next? So Roti, Kapda, Makan is the...
Food, cloth, food, clothing, shelter and internet. I mean, is internet essential? I mean, yeah, we do believe it is. I think this
and especially driven by women in the households with the kind of...
So thank you. We'll end here. But Roya, one last comment from you. So, when more I think about what you're doing, so it's one thing that you have the military presence there to defeat Taliban, but if the Taliban is inside every household, right? For many households in the villages which are under government control, then maybe what you're doing, if you do it for 5 more years, you will start a ground-up movement of women inside every family, which are going to cause change. And I do hope you succeed. Yeah, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.